looking at the strength with which the LTT was, conducting a air mobile operation with just a few aircrafts would have been not a very good option. Because we didn't have the simple capability to airlift that amount of troops into the rear or into an objective. Actually, in terms of assets, we didn't have it. We never used our, regarding special forces as infantry. If the operations were sensitive, if it involved a heavy civilian factor, yes, we used it. If the situation, due to LTT, for example, LTT counterattacks, and if the situation was critical and we were in the process of losing any tactical advantages, yes, we used our special forces. Special operations forces operated just seamlessly. If you take the battlefield framework from deep operations, close operations, mid-battle space as we call it, supporting counterattacks, and even rear operations. So they operated seamlessly. The tendency to use them, actually infantry might not be the word, the sensitiveness of the situation drove up their employment. It may not be a classical special operations answer, but those are the facts on the ground.
The special forces were used when the mission is critical. Otherwise, the normal infantry did the needful. So, yes, and about the air mobile operations, in fact, there were a couple of successful air mobile operations were conducted. And of course, later on, LTT countered the air mobile operations because wherever the aircrafts are seen, and they had the missiles also, so they tend to attack the aircrafts. In fact, during Mulativ rescue operation also, the air mobile troops were used. But thereafter, not many operations were done with air mobile brigade, but they were effectively used on ground operations. To answer General Mehta's question on Plan B, I think Professor Rohan Gurnanda should be able to contribute on that.
General, you asked a very interesting question, whether Prabhakaran had a plan B. Firstly, I want to say that after the fall of Kilinochchi, Prabhakaran was psychologically very down, and he did not play a decisive role in the day-to-day planning and preparation of the LTT attacks. It was mostly conducted by those LTT leaders who were around him. And Prabhakaran's main effort, LTT's main effort after Kilinochchi was largely to create, artificially engineer a humanitarian crisis, because he knew that the European countries, the Western countries, could be pressurized, could be persuaded by creating an humanitarian crisis. And that is the very reason he did that mass hostage taking. And in fact, the civilians themselves, they tried several times to escape from the fortifications that was built by the LTT. And of course, the LTT used very special groups, special teams to ensure that the civilians did not escape, although eventually a very large number of civilians managed to defy the LTT and go into army-controlled areas. Prabhakaran, in the final stage, had several plans, but as far as we know, there were two plans that were quite significant. One was he wanted to break out and he sent one of his commanders called Jayam, who went across the lagoon, but the military managed to intercept him and his team. And eventually, Prabhakaran's son led another team, and they want to break out. And again, the army had second and third lines, and they prevented that. Prabhakaran also communicated with KP, a man who was head of the LTT International Network, who was operating overseas. And KP was planning to bring a ship called Krishanta. The deputy head of the LTT Air Wing, Achudan, he was negotiating the purchase of a helicopter to be put on the ship called Krishanta for Prabhakaran to fly out of the no-fire zone. At the same time, the LTT was discussing with at least one government and UN personnel of LTT leadership being taken out of the no-fire zone to a third country. I think that there was a recent interview that was given by KP where he very clearly explained what was happening. But in the final phase, it was very difficult for the LTT to once again deceive the Sri Lankan military, because the Sri Lankan military clearly said that the military would like anyone who is coming out of the no-fire zone to basically not to come with any weapons, that they should totally disarm, because the military knew from the past experience of dealing with the LTT that the LTT will want a pause in order to regroup, rearm, and fight and start the fight again. Thank you.
Can I just press you on this? May I just, with the permission of the chair?
1 minute.
Yeah, you know, there is, this still begs the question that what happens to the legacy of the LTT as a residual guerrilla force. This doesn't answer the question. This only answers the question how the LTT leadership was to go out. The question, the plan B, must relate to a plan that would have been made earlier, pre-Kilinochchi or immediately after Kilinochchi, for dispersal of the assets that were still available into other areas. And if I might just mention one more, I think the LTT seriously believed, quite wrongly, that there would be intervention. The LTT believed that after Kilinochchi, that you would not be allowed to prosecute the operations. And in fact, one of your ministers said at that time, we are surprised that we continued with operations after Kilinochchi. And that's what Prabhakaran